What's up, everybody? I hope you're all well and having a good day. This is just a quick little fun video I wanted to share with you. So for those that don't know, I've just finished 3.1 in Heavensward, but I've only just finished all of the ARR dungeons. So there's a lot of like optional ones, a lot of hard modes, and they kind of clogged up my quest list for a while, and some I just never got around to finding or doing. But I think I've finally done every single A Realm Reborn dungeon. So I just wanted to share a quick video going over my top 5 dungeons and why I think these stand out as the best dungeons in A Realm Reborn. And maybe in the future I could do a worst, but there weren't that many that I'd say like were really bad, except maybe Totorak. But generally they were all pretty good. But there was some that stood head and shoulders above the rest, and I just wanted to share a little fun video on my favorites. So honestly, I couldn't get over how many dungeons there were in A Realm Reborn and how many are still relevant today. So like even in Heavensward, I've gone back and done like really early dungeons as part of the leveling roulette. I helped a friend, or I've helped 2 friends actually clear some of the lower level dungeons that they needed for the MSQ because they were struggling in queues. And I've even found some new optional ones over the last few days when I tried to push and clear them all. So let's get straight into this in no particular order. So anyone that watches my streams or watches my YouTube videos will know I am a huge fan of Tonberries. I love them so much. I think they're such cool and interesting monsters. And for that reason, Wanderer's Palace is one of my all-time favorites. This entire dungeon themed around Tonberries. I'd say the dungeon itself is pretty average until you go into it in like hard mode and learn more about it, because that's when it really comes together. The story of the dungeon is top tier. It really is top tier. If you've done the Scholar quest line, I'd highly recommend that, because it adds so much lore to this dungeon, and you learn about like the plight of the Tonberries and what they're all about, and it makes this fun little dungeon really dark. I don't want to ruin the Scholar quest line, but I highly recommend doing it just to see what the deal is with all these Tonberries in Wanderer's Palace. And of course, one of the coolest things is you can kill the small Tonberries and then the big ones in true Final Fantasy fashion, chase you with the big knife. They'll delete you instantly and you can't attack them back. So you've got to run from them. There's a sense of panic no matter what level you are. Really cool. Huge fan, and I really recommend this dungeon. It's so optional, so hidden. You've probably blasted through A Realm Reborn without even noticing it exists. Next, favorite dungeon for me in A Realm Reborn is Snowcloak. This is the most relaxing and calming soundtrack, calming dungeon in the whole game so far that I've played. I was blown away by the eerie Minecraft calming music as soon as you enter here. It's so peaceful, so relaxing. I played this super late at night on stream. It was probably like midnight when I was playing this, and it just felt so calm. There's something, I don't know, there's something special about this dungeon. I think most of it comes from the soundtrack, but the bosses are really cool as well. The thing that makes this dungeon in my top 5 is Fenrir, ripped straight out of mythology. Absolutely love this fight. There's like these big ice columns that come down and you've got to hide behind them strategically. The boss itself just looks and feels like a giant ice monster. It's in the perfect place. It's got these big howling winds. Absolutely brings the dungeon together. And I don't know, I feel like just because the music, the setting, and the monsters, it just felt special. It felt like more than a dungeon. It felt like you were doing a raid, and I don't know why, but I think it's just because everything came together. I think they just perfected the dungeon. The aesthetic they were going for, they just completely nailed it. And that's why for me, whenever this turns up in a roulette, I'm just over the moon. Absolutely love this dungeon. Next up, it's no secret that I'm a huge fan of medieval games. I made this whole channel to share my love of medieval games, you know, Dark Souls-esque, dragons, knights. Obviously, Heavensward is one of my favorite expansions, one of my favorite pieces of content I've ever played because of that. But this is where it first came up. Stone Vigil, a giant, icy, crumbling castle, these ruins that were just inhabited by dragons. Absolutely phenomenal. And the best bit is this dungeon comes along at a really weak point in ARR. The A Realm Reborn story has some real lows, and in my opinion it was at an all-time low coming up to this dungeon, but this just brought it from a real slog through the quests to just an incredible dungeon. You've got the giant dragon that's fueled by the Ascian, and then you've got the airship with Cid, and it just leads to so many good parts of the story. So for where it's placed, it's just perfect. And then the aesthetic is just incredible. And the fights themselves are pretty good. The final dragon can get pretty tough if your healer's not on the ball and if your tank isn't moving around properly. So overall, this was really, I'm not going to say it was difficult because it was just a normal dungeon, but overall, it just had everything I would expect from a leveling dungeon. It was just perfect aesthetic, really fun, amazing story tied into it. And every time I go back, I'm thinking about how shocked I was when I first got here, how shocked I was when I saw the Ascian power this dragon up, how in awe I was at all the dragons just lying around and roaming the corridors, setting fire to stuff. And like for having those memories, whenever I go back to Stone Vigil, I just kind of have a smile on my face because I just love the dungeon. The number 4, a Realm Reborn dungeon in Final Fantasy XIV for me is Tamtara Deepcroft Hard. I thought this story was phenomenal. The dungeon itself, I'm going to be fully honest, is just kind of, it's mediocre. It's a mediocre layout. It's pretty straightforward and there's nothing too special, but the story behind it is 10 out of 10. It's just top writing. I think the first one, the non-hard version, is one of the first dungeons you come across. I think it might be just after Sastasha. It's really early on, and you learn about the adventuring party that goes here. And this ties it up so much later. You go back here and you learn about what happened to the adventuring party, the woman that was left behind, the guilt she felt and what it led her to. And it gets so dark. It leads to dark magic and necromancy. And if you go through and read these torn pages, you learn the story of what happened to her and kind of how she lost her mind and what she was willing to do to bring back her loved one. And as you go through the dungeon, you see that. You find yourself fighting disposed body parts and like lungs and organs and things like that, and all these weird things she's been doing and all these spells that haven't worked and all these things that haven't quite worked out. And you see that she wasn't able to do what she wanted. She wasn't able to bring him back, and that ultimately has driven her crazy. And you get this insane cutscene where she catches fire and falls off the end, and just the story writing here in this little small dungeon that doesn't even need to be in the game is just amazing. And then it even goes out of the dungeon. It carries on and you see her. Apparently there's rumors that she could appear as a ghost in the major cities. I don't know if that's true. I've never seen it myself, but a lot of people in the comments were saying that. But it's just so creepy. And she also then leads the next part of the story into Palace of the Dead. Just what they did with this dungeon is 10 out of 10. I love it. I think it's such a good idea. And then the dark and edgy theme leads straight into my 5th favorite dungeon, the number 5 best dungeon in A Realm Reborn, in my opinion. Hawk Manor. I think this is a work of art. It just looks so epic. It looks so cool and dark. You've got the lighting perfectly on the stairs as you enter. I was blown away when I came in here. And you come in here at such a low level. I think this is just incredible. The dungeon itself looks like it's ripped straight out of like Resident Evil Village or something. Really, really, really good vibes here, and the lead up to it is really cool. So you do this like murder investigation, whether the lady of the manor had been taking these women up to a room and torturing them, and you see you find out that there were eyeballs everywhere, and you find all the cookie trail that leads you to the dungeon. And then eventually the guy tells you everything that happened and what she'd done, and that she'd just gone evil, and you have to go put a stop to her. And then when you find her at the end, the lady of the manor, it's just such a cool fight. You've got the lamps bleeding darkness into the room. I think everything here is just really, really good. For an A Realm Reborn dungeon, one of the early dungeons, to be so epic, so dark, and so cool, with such a good story behind it, just makes it that much better in my opinion. I also like how there's kind of you lead the way for the new people as you come in with the niche little things you learn. So you teach people how to return to go back to the start of the dungeon. There's the little shortcuts, there's the keys and where to use them, and there's all these neat little things that you don't really understand when you first come here. And then you teach the new blood as you do it again as a veteran going in your roulettes. I really, really like this dungeon. I think it learns you a lot about the game, and you leave it feeling like you've done a good dungeon. It doesn't feel like a small side dungeon with no story and that's just there for filler. It feels like a big piece of ARR, a big piece of the story, and a real worthwhile dungeon. You really feel like you've spent your time doing something fun. So this will always be one of my favorite dungeons. And then obviously there's a great story tie into it as well. And that's it really. I just wanted to share my favorite 5 dungeons, the top 5 dungeons in Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn, in my opinion. It's taken me a hell of a long time to get through all the dungeons. I think I got through like 90% of them, and there were just some that were left behind, sat in the quest log, or some that I just forgot to pick up. But eventually, as I was going through Heavensward, I kind of started churning away at them. And I think, I mean, there might be one that I've missed. Apologies if there is. But I think I've got them all now. And yeah, these are definitely my top 5. I'd have to say Hullbreaker Isle may have got in there. That was kind of like, it was between that and Hawk Manor. But yeah, I went with Hawk Manor in the end, just because it had more of a story impact. And it was like one of the main dungeons. So it kind of hit a little harder. But Hullbreaker Isle is probably my number 6 if I was doing a top 6. Yeah, that's it. That's all this video is. I'd love to know in the comments what your top 5 dungeons are and why. Obviously, I can't reply to everyone, but I'll try and go through and see what everyone's favorite is, because I think there are parts of the story and parts of the dungeons that sink in and hit with different people. Obviously, being like a big fan of medieval games, Snowcloak, Stone Vigil, Dust Vigil, all those games and anything that really ties into Curtius really hit really well with me, and I loved them. And as soon as I walked in, the aesthetic and the music got me. So no matter what was in the dungeon, I kind of had a biased opinion. So I'd love to know what your favorite was. What got you earlier? I saw a lot of people like the Quan dungeon. A lot of people talking about that, and that one I didn't really enjoy. The sunken temple of Quan. That one I didn't really get it. I didn't really enjoy it that much, but people were saying they loved it. So it's obvious that everyone has like these favorite dungeons. So I'd love to know what your favorites were and why. Obviously, I'm only in Heavensward, so let's keep it to ARR. I don't know anything past 3.1. If you got a favorite dungeon from Heavensward though, yeah, let me know. Other than that, thank you so much for watching another one of these fun little videos. Take care, and I'll catch you in the next one.